Hi there, you're listening to John from Hindsight. Welcome to the fourth and final video in our user training session. During this video, I'm going to take you through everything to do with reports and where you can find additional information within Hindsight to help you navigate through your clients' books and records. So we're going to be looking at reports and how you can present the right picture of the condition of a client's accounting records. Anything that needs to be flagged up and highlighted to a client, we're going to walk through and see how you can find those hidden gems and problems within the client's books and records. We're going to start off first by going through the client list. We're going to look at how the client list is structured on a portfolio basis, how you can interact with that client list to break chunks of information down into something that's usable and workable. So we're going to go across into Hindsight and we're going to start with that area of the system first. Okay, so from the client list, what we can see is I've got just 5 companies listed here. That's all I've got access to in my portfolio. So the first point of note is that you will only see clients in your client portfolio list if you have been assigned them by a practice admin. So if you think you are missing clients from this list, you will need to speak to a practice admin because they will need to allocate those clients to you. Now, we can see we've got a whole range of different metrics and bits of information about each client in your portfolio. I've only got 5 clients I'm working with. You can imagine if there are lots of clients in here, there's quite a lot of data that we could potentially be, looking at and working through. But there may be situations where we only want to be looking at and dealing with a certain subsection. So you have the ability using this grid to drag rows to the top here so that you can group by these rows. So if I just bring bookkeeping up here, we can now see that we've got items that are grouped. We have the ability to see which ones aren't set. So we haven't actually told the system who does the bookkeeping for the demo company there. You can group by multiple options, but for now we're just going to leave that as it is. Now, as we've mentioned, there are a lot of different columns going across here. You may not need all of this information. You may not want to work with all of that. So we can quite easily, using the columns section over here, just decide to take out individual chunks. You can see we can also drag and drop stuff. So if we want them in a different order, we can do that as well. Okay, so what we can do if we've messed around with this grid and we want to bring it back into its original order, we can click on the burger menu here and we can tell the system to reset the columns, and we're back to where we started from. So let's assume at the moment I'm not interested in client details. I just want to look at some of the bookkeeping data. So what I could do to make my life easy is just actually get rid of that whole section, and now we can see we are working with the bookkeeping section being the first part of this. Now, there may be items that I want. For example, perhaps we want to look at the year ends. Maybe we want to try and understand what quarter ends we've got coming up, and we want to know which clients have got poor heart rates. We can now do that quickly and easily from this screen. You can also use the filters at the top if we wish to drill down into this even further. And once we've got the data looking how we want it to, then obviously it's nice and simple to just sort these columns. You can sort by multiple columns just by holding the Shift key. So if we looked at the year ends most recent first, and then we also wanted to look at the days to the quarter end, we can now see we're filtering and sorting by 2 columns there. Okay, again, at any point in time, should we wish to return this back to its original sequence, we can just reset the columns there. As well as the filters across the top of the columns, we can also use the filter section from here. If we know there are lots of different things that we want to filter on, rather than doing them individually across the top, we can do that here. There are a couple of nice hidden features in amongst here as well. We can highlight some information if we've got values in these columns, so it has to be a value in this column for this to work. But what we can do is we can put this into chart range. So we can see here we've got the sales and the profit figures, and we can download that as a file if we wish to. We've also got the ability to turn this into a pivot table and actually work with this data as if it was kind of a pivot column. Now, because of the type of information we've got in this grid, this is not massively useful because we've only got a couple of columns that have got values in them. But anywhere else that you see a grid in the system, if you see it looking like this, then it just means there are some hidden options in there for you to kind of hack around with the data. Now, anything that I've just shown you here, if we've changed columns, if we've filtered, if we've sorted, we've got the grid showing the data in exactly the same way that we want it and how we want to work with it. We can also download that as a CSV file from this button at the top here. And what that will do is it will download it as a CSV file, but it will download exactly as we saw the grid, how we've set it up and how we've structured it. So you're only going to get the data that you want to work with. Okay, so that is how you can use the client portfolio list to kind of report on what's happening within the system and make it a usable solution for you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the insights section of the system now. The insight section of Hindsight is basically a high-level overview of everything that's going on within the system. It's a series of ticks and crosses depending on whether alerts are triggered to highlight to you potential trends, problems, issues, and ultimately opportunities within your portfolio. So we'll go and take a look at the insight section of Hindsight now. So as I've explained, it is a list of ticks and crosses. We've got our clients and we've got the different alerts that are generated from within Hindsight. Green ticks means everything is okay and that alert for that client is within the parameters that you've set. Anything that's got a red cross is indicating that that's outside of the parameters, so i.e. an alert has triggered for that particular instance. So we can see we've got quite a lot of red on this first page, which is not great. It means the bookkeeping is not necessarily too up to date. We've got lots of unreconciled bank transactions, and we've got a load of bills due there. Now, what we may find from this section is if we actually reconcile the bank account, we may find that the bills due is not as bad as it currently looks. If we want to understand what's going on with any of these clients, we can click into the red cross, and that will provide us with the additional information and the context of why that red cross has appeared in the first instance. And this is the same information that you get presented when you look at the alert screen. The only difference is you don't have the mechanisms here to kind of complete, dismiss and exclude alerts. It's just to give you an overview and an understanding of what's going on with these clients. If you've got a client meeting, then it might be useful to look at it in this way before you have that client meeting to get an understanding. If you look across a row, you're looking at a client's performance. If you see lots of red crosses in a row, that might indicate that there is a problem with that particular client. If you look down a column and you see lots of red crosses in a column, that would indicate there's a process, a procedure or system issue. Now, they may present problems, but that also could be a potential opportunity. If the clients do their own bookkeeping and you see lots of red crosses, then you should also be seeing lots of opportunities being flagged up to you there. If you do the bookkeeping and you see lots of red crosses in a column, that could potentially indicate that you have a problem area within your practice, and there's a training issue there that needs to be addressed. And the way this is structured, we've got the main bookkeeping and bank items on the front page. Second page, we're looking at mainly the sales information. So again, if there are lots of red crosses on here, we'd be thinking about what's happening with the sales ledger within our clients, what's working, what's not working, how can we help them, how can we give them more assistance. On the third page, we've got the purchase ledger and the bill side of the system. So we can see here, this is pretty clean. We've only got a couple of red crosses there. So in the grand scheme of things, this one's actually looking pretty decent. And on the fourth and final page, we've got some system-based information here. So old accounts, asset balances that are credit balances, and liabilities that have got a debit balance on them. So something there that's a potential misposting that needs to be addressed. But that's it with the insights page. It should be a short snapshot and overview of what's going on at any point in time. Now, you will notice there are no options on here to export or print this information. The major reason for that being that we are displaying data here that relates to lots of different clients. So if you were to download this, what would you be using it for and who would you be sending it to? Because obviously we don't want to be displaying information and sending out information that's got other clients' data on this page, which is why for the time being we've not given you the functionality to actually download and print this information. So moving on. The next section we're going to look at is a couple of the reporting items. We're going to look at heart rate first, and then we're going to look at the MOT report. So the heart rate report is our information that we can generate and send out to a client. It can be used for internal purposes, but it can also be used for external purposes, depending on who is responsible for the books and records of that client. Okay, so we can see there's an example on the screen here. We're going to go into Hindsight. I'm going to show you what the heart rate report looks like and the information that's displayed there and what you can do with it. So this only works for those clients that are on the paid plan. The MOT report is for those clients that are on a free plan. Now, what we can see from the heart rate report, using the example data, we monitor the last 90 days of the quality of the record. So if you want to be able to display to a client what's happening with their business, the impact of changes that you're making, hopefully this graph will be going in the right direction and you'll be able to demonstrate the impact that you're having on their business. Likewise, if things start going wrong with their business and you are trying to encourage them to work with you in a more deeper relationship where you do the bookkeeping, it can also be used for that if you can see that things aren't working well for that business. The monitor at the top is color coded, depending on the average score. This one's 81, so we're in we're in the green territory. If it was below 50, it'd be red, and if it's between 51 and 75, it'll be amber. We've broken down the different alerts into 4 kind of subcategories. Sometimes you can have one area that's not performing particularly well, and that gets masked by the overall scores. So we're just trying to break this out in a bit more detail to give you a bit more relevance in context to what you're looking at. You can see underneath we've got the different subcategories down here, so you can see which alerts fall into these subcategories for you. Every time an alert is triggered, that generates a red cross. And we can see from the scoring metrics that we've scored 50% in sales. That's because we've got a maximum score available of 2 and we've scored 1 out of 2. The score is based on the priorities that you assign to the alerts and the number of alerts that you've got for a client. So you can't necessarily compare one client's heart rate against another client's heart rate and say that business is performing better than this business, because they're not the same thing. What you need to be doing is tracking and monitoring a client against itself over a period of time to see that that business is either improving its situation or its situation is declining. So every time there's an alert generated, it will add a red cross onto this report, and there will be a bit of commentary as to why that has flagged. This is where, when you download the report as a PDF, send that out to a client, you can be safe in the knowledge that there's already information contained within the report explaining to the client what has happened and therefore what resolutions need to be carried out to make this work for them. There are some hyperlinks in here where we can see the number of transactions and how that's made up. These are relatively small amounts, so nothing too bad. This hyperlink will not be displayed on the PDF that is sent out to a client. It will just be the number, so they will need to go and do some investigative work there to find out the number of transactions, but we are telling them which bank accounts that it relates to. If on this report you see a toggle button and that toggle button is off, what that's highlighting to you is that just for this client, for this report and for that alert, it's actually been turned off in the system. So it's just to flag up to you that there are things going on in the system that are not being checked because you've decided to turn them off. Okay, so it's just an indicator there to let you know this is turned off in the system. It just might jog your memory and make you rethink about whether you need to have that turned off or not. The only other color coding in items that you may see on this report is that If we had all sales items turned off and there wasn't a scoring metrics for sales, maybe it's a cash business, so we've got all of the sales items turned off, you would see that the score icon over here would actually be in blue, and there would be an NA there to represent that it's not applicable. We've got all of the alerts turned off for that subsection, and therefore it's not making up the overall score of what's going on. Okay, so the next report within Hindsight is the MOT report, and this is similar to the heart rate report. It's trying to establish a list of items where things are working and not working, and ultimately who's responsible for those. Is it yourself or is it the client? Now, the idea with the free MOT report is because there are no priorities assigned to these alerts, it's a simple yes or no. Has it triggered an alert or hasn't it triggered an alert? It's enough for those clients that you don't have regular contact with for them to still get some information in their hand, and for you to be able to demonstrate to that client that you've got access to their Xero, you are looking at their information, and you are providing them some value. And in a lot of respects, they might not even be paying you for that additional service at the moment, but it's a good way for you to start conversations with the clients. So we can see from the MOT report, again, we've got an example piece of data here. We can run the report for different clients that we've got. I don't have any clients that are on free apart from the demo company. But if they were, I could select them there, and again, I can download this as a PDF if I wish to send it out to a client, or maybe I want to send it to a colleague because I'm the manager and I'm looking at this. Perhaps I'm not happy with what I'm seeing, so I might want to just send it to them as a PDF and say, hey, can we take a look at this? I've got a client meeting next week, and it'd be really good to get some of this stuff knocked on the head before that session. Likewise, the way this can be used is if you've got a VAT return quarter coming up, or maybe you've got a statutory account report that needs producing. This is a nice, easy, simple way to send it out to a client and just say, look, I've got your VAT, I've got your accounts that are due. Can you please take a look at these items for me? The ones with red crosses are where I really need some assistance from you. If you could help me out with those, I can get your VAT done. I can get your accounts done for you. So again, very similar to the heart rate report. As I said, this time it's just a very straightforward yes or no. There's no scoring or monitor metrics because those are not included on the free plan. But hopefully what you can see is we've got bank information, sales, purchases, and then the log date information down here. So some pretty simple to understand metrics, and enough for a client to know whether their books and records are in a reasonable order. And as I mentioned a second ago, also from your point of view as the accountant, a nice, easy, quick way for you to be able to establish conversations with clients about things that they might not be aware of but need attention. And it just gives you the ability to be able to do that for them. Okay, so finally, transactions. Now, transaction volumes is an interesting one, and obviously there has been a trend towards people using transaction volumes as a way of pricing, particularly around bookkeeping. And I think that makes, I think it makes sense. My belief is that charging by the hour for bookkeeping becomes more and more difficult, because when you put a pound note against an hourly rate, people will just want to try and compare that to other things that they're paying for. And it makes it hard to sell that service because people just think, well, I can do that myself. Now, with pricing by transaction volumes, it's easy to be able to demonstrate what people are getting for their money. And it's also easy to identify when there's an upward trend or a downward trend. But that does mean, obviously, we have to be honest and we have to put prices up and down. One of the things that transaction volumes are really useful for as well is processing. It gives you a good indication of how people are processing the books and records and whether their processing is up to date. So there's another reason for it. And also you can use the data to see if there are kind of any seasonal trends, or whether you can see a business is struggling, have the volumes dropped, has business started to take a bit of a dip, is there something there that you could be talking to them about and flagging up. So let's just pop into the system and I'll take you through the transactions side of things. So we're looking at this from the kind of portfolio view. You can also grab the transactions in the individual client record as well if you want to look at metrics for just an individual client. These charts at the top are kind of, interactive, so you can see the difference in the volumes. What you can also do is just mess around with these kind of charts and graphs at the top here if you want to look at just particular types of transactions. Now underneath, what we can see from the next panel is we've got the key metrics of the different types of transactions that are processed through Xero, and what you can see is the volume of transactions relates to the period that we've got selected up here, and then we've got the change versus the prior period. So if we're looking at 12 months, we are looking at the 12 most recent months, full completed months. Today's the 4th of April, so we would be displaying to you from April 21 to March 22 in these tables underneath. There we go. So you've got the full year. We've got the change in terms of the number of transactions, but also that percentage change as well, just so that we can keep an eye on what's going on. Now, as I've said, this is for the entire portfolio. If you wanted to understand those metrics for an individual client, you could go into their client record and take a look at it from there. What we can also do here is we've got the ability to break down by clicking on the blue icon there, and we can break down into the individual client record. Now this is where I was saying it's useful to obviously see transaction volumes in their entirety, but if we look beyond purely the transaction volumes, what we want to try and do is identify any trends. Now, one thing we can see with this client in particular, the number of transactions is roughly half of what it was last year. No sales invoices being raised, no credits. You see plenty of bills coming in and roughly the same number of bank transactions. So, what's occurring with this business? Has it stopped trading? Have they found another way to raise sales invoices? If they have, why are they not being put into Xero? How are they recording their VAT if that's the case? One way you can also use this information is if you've got lots of bank transactions and hardly any invoices and bills, that might be an indicator that somebody's processing everything as spend and receive money transactions, so they're not keeping a proper purchase ledger and sales ledger. Now, if that's the client doing things in that way, you might want to talk to them about best practice, because at the end of the year, you're going to have lots of movements around accruals, prepayments, deferred income if people aren't actually posting their invoices and bills into the ledgers as they should do. So there's things to look out for here: seasonal variations, an increase in business, a decline in business, people stop processing, how they're processing their documentation, as well as the totals for transactional processing. So that's kind of it for the reporting side of Hindsight. As we've seen from this video, there's plenty of different elements to the way that the system works. There's a whole different video on dashboards. If you haven't watched the previous 3 videos in this Hindsight user training series, then I would highly recommend that you go back and watch those, because there is a whole video on the kind of dashboard metrics and information that's available there as well. Thank you.